We will get started. Let the minutes show that everyone is here. Public comments on non-agenda items? No? All right. Meeting minutes. I noticed Mr. Mosier made some corrections. We have a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
With those? With the corrections?
With the corrections, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Seconded.
All right. Then they will be approved. The implementation plan analysis and technical diagnostic memo. The three of us were at the GPAC meeting when this was discussed, but do you have further issues you want to discuss on it?
No, on this one, no.
All right. In the public, anybody want to discuss this further? The technical diagnostic memo? I see you.
Thank you, Chair Gardner, members of the committee. My name is Jim Mosier. This morning I was reading the staff report for the zoning administrator meeting coming up tomorrow morning, and it provided a very good example of how the best laid intentions to implement our general plan ideas kind of atrophy and get lost. This particular one involved a business establishment, and there is a policy somewhere in the general plan promoting a vibrant business community, and that was supposedly supported by an implementation program, 24.1 if I remember the name, and that tasked the city with developing a strategic plan for economic development, and it was to be reviewed annually, which it was. It was developed, it was reviewed a couple of times, and what struck my attention in the staff report, it was citing a city council policy, D9, about business development, and that in fact had been enacted at some time to implement that vibrant business community aspect that was promised in the general plan. However, over the years, as you remember as a councilman, sometimes the policies come back for revision, and they sometimes come back in a huge package of policies for revision, which nobody has time to go through. So staff kind of deletes things and changes the policies into more reflecting what they're doing rather than what the general plan promised that they do. So the original policy was calling for the city manager to make an annual report to the city council about the status of the strategic plan and how things were going. Then that got modified to just kind of the general plan. I forget the second modification. It got taken away, to where the policy is now just the city manager will look after that we have good business or something like that. So that the policy which was cited in this as if it was something we're still pursuing, we're actually not pursuing at all as far as I can tell. And that, in that case, it atrophied through the policy, which was originally strong, getting weakened until there is no policy. And the annual review just got forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you.
So can we ask staff for clarification on that? Are you guys aware of this at all?
I think, so as you mentioned, as Mr. Mosier mentioned, the comment surrounds justification used in a discretionary application for a limited term permit. And it talks about a policy that encourages a vibrant business community, and then it references an implementation program or plan that then appears to have referenced council policy. I'm not familiar with that specifically, but it sounds like a comment that goes back to concerns about actual implementation of the general plan and how that's going to go forward through this update, and potentially how to counteract dilution over time where council policies change or the municipal code changes, and now the original intent of that policy is sort of watered down. And as Mr. Mosier pointed out, that annual review is not happening, and it doesn't sound like it's been happening for some time. So I'm not innately familiar with that policy in particular, but I think the comment goes back to the implementation plan analysis and really how to keep the general plan and its implementation more accountable going forward. I think that's the bigger comment there.
Okay, so can you clarify when you say limited?
Oh, so There's a limited term permit.
That's what
Right, so basically, the city zoning code allows a limited term permit for uses that are otherwise not permitted by the code, or maybe it's a temporary use. For example, a pumpkin patch is a
Okay.
limited term permit. So that's the item that is on the zoning administrator agenda, that, not a pumpkin patch, but the limited term permit is what Mr. Moser's referencing.
So the economic development only deals with limited?
No,
That's what I'm
no,
not understanding.
no. So there's a finding in the limited term permit that talks about, consistency with the general plan. And so staff uses the general plan policies to support the recommendation to approve that limited term permit. And so it sounds like we're leaning on a policy that's not really being implemented as it was promised to be implemented. That's the concern.
Okay. So not to be naive or sophomoric, I'm not understanding, is there a general economic development policy that's implemented by the city in regards to the entire business community of the city of Newport Beach? I'm assuming that's what it is, and there should be an annual report to that, not just limited.
Yeah, and this isn't even related to just that policy. So this is a private business owner has applied for a limited term permit to do something at their restaurant.
Right. No, I understand that part.
Right.
But Jim, is that your understanding?
That there was yes, that is my understanding, and it was the original intent of the general plan to promote this thing called a strategic plan for economic development. And the strategic plan was developed. I know this from talking to the finance committee, and it got one annual review, and then it kind of got set to the side. And then this council policy was supposed to be bolstering that plan, which again called for an annual review and direction from the city council how to keep it going and keep it strong. And the policy kept getting watered down during the periodic review of the council policies until the whole thing is just kind of on the shelf now.
But are you
And
understanding?
so in this particular application, it was presented as a justification that it was promoting this general plan policy that we have, which it could be said that it was, but it was like we actively are pursuing that, and it's in the staff report because the applicant prompted the staff that this was a justification for something that didn't seem quite kosher.
Yeah, okay.
All right, and this is sort of on the same topic that we've talked about of a better implementation review of the general plan, and which is something that we need to talk more fully. I hope that GPAC will discuss more fully at a future date, because we just did it with the bicycle plan. The bicycle plan was supposed to be updated every 5 years, and it's been 10 years and that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
we're very good at doing plans. Susan, did you have something?
It is following up on a comment that I made to the GPAC, and it had to do with implementation of the general plan and the fact that there is a trend within local governments over the last 10 years where they have been focused on using the general plan in their everyday administration of the city. And there are cities that we can point to where they have drawn into a city manager role or assistant city manager role someone who is intimately familiar with the general plan and capable of providing that direction and guidance. And the cities that I can name that I'm familiar with, and I know there are many more, include the City of Ontario, Rancho Cucamonga, Fullerton, Riverside. There's 4. Okay. And it's the intent of not just creating the general plan, but using it on a day-to-day basis to actually administer various aspects of the city. And there may be many ways of doing it, but I think that should be the intent of what we're trying to accomplish here.
That might be something, I wonder if the consultants might have worked with one of these cities and just, not a big, deep paper, but just some comments on how they have done this as a comment, something to present to the General Plan Advisory Committee at some point. Susan?
Well, I can add that one of the individuals there have been individuals who have moved from a planning or community development director position into a city manager or assistant city manager position. And there's two that I think are outstanding. One.
All right, you're not on the mic. Why don't you just send those to me, and I'll forward them to the staff,
All right.
and they can follow up with that. Thank you. All right.
Okay, so I remember you making that point. So my question to staff is, I don't see a general plan as being part of the daily operation. I do understand the part of holding it accountable, because I see it as being more task-oriented. So how have you guys talked about this internally?
I don't think we've explored it at length.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that we do use the general plan to guide, as Mr. Mosier pointed out, recommendations on land use decisions.
Yeah.
Although there may not be strong teeth in the implementation of that policy, it's still a policy that we look to as guiding, potentially supporting a use that's being proposed. So I think we do use it more than not, especially in planning and land use. And possibly in recreation and senior services. I think there's a lot of use of the general plan, even if they're not overtly referencing the general plan at all times. But it sounds like what GPAC member DeSantis is referencing is a more overt use and leaning on a general plan to really govern day-to-day operations. So that's something we can definitely explore as part of the process in general plan update development moving forward.
I think it would be interesting to have at least bring up the idea of, is there a different way than perhaps we have used our general plan in the past? And maybe it's not of interest, but we could at least see if there'd like some information on it.
Okay, another stupid question. Who is the gatekeeper of
Would you
implementing?
stop with the stupid
I know. But who is the gatekeeper? Is it the city manager's role? Is it her responsibility in determining if policy's following the general plan? Is it staff's?
As I said, I think it's more of a tool for decision-making than anything else. I don't think anyone's looking at the general plan and looking at it as a menu of what they're going to do for the day.
No, I agree with that.
It's
Yeah.
more when they're guiding decisions, and if council is amplifying something from the general plan, then that gets more attention. And that's where we have been talking about, maybe it's important to highlight a couple of elements every other year to kind of bring it to council's attention. Because everything is really guided by council, and so it's not to say that the city manager determines which part of the general plan they're going to use, or which department's portion of the general plan should be used every day. It's more of a reference document that we look to if we need to make a determination or decision on something.
Yeah, but to the public's comment, who's monitoring to see if what the council's doing is following the general plan, or if it's antagonistic towards it?
Yeah, I would say community development is probably the best verse in our general plan, and in terms of implementation, a lot of our land use decisions, we do reference compliance with general plan policies. However, there's a lot of different elements in the general plan, especially related to harbor and
So the
maintaining
land use is the
beach.
low-hanging fruit.
Right.
I get that.
Right, and so I would say we're the experts in implementing the general plan for land use decisions, but other departments and public works, implements the general plan as well, but they're not as well versed in all the different policies. But they are implementing the general plan, and so on a yearly basis, we have our annual general plan report to the city council where we go through the implementation program and we highlight the different activities that the city's doing, such as public works, and implementing some of the policies in there to show we are implementing our policies.
But it's very land use oriented.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, unless someone brings up something like there's a building that they feel it has historical resonance, say, nobody on council is going to pay any attention to the historic element probably. So a lot of it comes either from a general plan amendment, this can't be, this is land use is obviously contrary to what the general plan says, so we have to have an amendment. That gets a lot of attention. Or some member of the public is very interested in a particular subject and does the research, like Mr. Mosher, and brings it up and said, this is a conflict.
Yeah.
But so that's why I think that if we had a better program, an expanded program of review, a lot of these things would come up, and we would be more in tune with the overall general plan. But that is something for the GPAC's discussion. Anything else on this? Okay, good. Outreach summary. Oh, I know one thing I want to mention, not necessarily here, but would you remind the consultants that in areas where there is a commission or a city committee, that we do want to have that communication with them at some point?
Yes, so that'll be part of phase 2
Okay.
of the outreach, and that's going to be very explicitly listed in the document that'll govern that outreach
Okay,
component.
great. All right. Kimberly, anything on the outreach?
Nothing new, no.
Okay. Outreach, any comments on outreach from our large public here? All right. The noise subcommittee. This is going to be interesting. I have no idea how the council will react, but I will be there to make the pitch with staff's assistance I think that particularly with Mr. Mosher's research, which is always so thorough, it brought up some really good points just about how old some of the stuff we looked at is, and the fact that the freeway, isn't included. It's like, okay, well, they're quiet, aren't they? So I will work with staff. I'll make my own report, and you obviously make your. But we'll coordinate and make sure that we're not contradicting each other in what we ask for. And I don't know whether you want to put a price tag on it when we bring it to council, or what?
Yeah, I can envision having an estimate of
Okay.
what this work would cost.
I think that would be a good idea, because I say we're going to get pushback from at least one person, I think. But hopefully we can get support. So comments from the public on the noise element? Okay.
So, quick question.
Yes.
So, based on all of the questions. So there's a series of questions here. Are those questions that we need to answer, or are those questions that will be addressed in the memo that you guys are preparing?
Yeah. Set the ladder.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be addressed then. All right, and now we come to our favorite part. And I say this not because we don't want new members, it's just that it's very awkward to do this sort of thing in public without any sort of discussion beforehand. I'm always impressed with the background, the depth of background that the applicants have. And I will make a general statement in that this isn't like a sorority rush or a fraternity rush. This has nothing to do with looks or personality. It doesn't even have, in some ways, just general qualifications. What we're looking for in many cases are holes. We've tried to make a very diverse committee, and if we see a gap and someone has that gap, even though they may not be, we wish they were in a different district or whatever, we will do that. I'm going to lead off because I've got the microphone, and I'm going to say two people struck. Oh, I'm sorry. First of all, is there a member who has applied? Are you an applicant? Okay, all right.
Do you want to be?
Give you a chance to give you a chance to have your say. Virginia, I think you will know Virginia if you saw her. Virginia Anders Elmore. Once she learned about the general plan process, she has been to every GPAC meeting, and she's been to most of the subcommittee meetings. She's been much more active than many of our actual members. She is particularly interested in sustainability issues like sea level rise, but she would certainly, she's shown her very true interest, and she would be able to get involved right away since she has been following this for a number of months now. The other one that caught my eye in particular, was Ekta Nayak, because of her experience with real estate development, but she's also done a lot with multifamily and some affordable workforce housing. And I know that the housing element is down the land use element, but there are still ideas, I'm sure, that we can pursue to help us, because that's going to be our challenge. We all know that. We can build market rate housing, no problem, but to get that workforce housing. And so I just thought that caught my eye. The others, I mean, Jeff Herdman's been on council. He's very knowledgeable. My only concern about Jeff is that we have a couple of board members from SPAWN already on the committee, and we have, the policy of one person per committee was only for city committees, but it's sort of in the same vein. So, but other ideas, I'm certainly, as I say, they were all so good.
Well, can I mention one thing on Ms. Nyack?
Yeah.
The one thing that did catch my eye is she was part of the Discern group.
That is exactly what I was
Yeah,
going to bring
I
up,
know.
and I'm not comfortable with that.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, I saw that, and I did the same thing, but I thought,
And
well,
nothing
with the
bad
affordable-
about Discern, it's just
Yeah.
potential.
There's a lot of
conflict.
complications there.
Okay, I saw that, and well, but I think you're right. So, other thoughts then. We have Lisa Ackley, and let's see what my notes are.
Janine Padra, Rita Goldberg, Dennis Briggs.
Yeah, so,
Is Jeff on? Jeff was on SPAWN too?
yeah, Jeff is on the board of SPAWN now. He was on the city council. He's interested in arts and sustainability. Rita is particularly, she was on the Arts Commission, so she has city committee.
Yeah, I liked her.
Mr. Biggs has been a Newport Beach Police Department volunteer, and his strength is getting people working together as a team. And Ms. Ackley is been involved in certain of the neighborhood issues where she lives, and is concerned about the flight path, so she would be probably interested in noise contours and that sort of thing.
My short list was Janine Padra, Rita Goldberg, and Dennis Briggs.
So, I'm sorry, say it again? Okay. Janine?
Rita, and Dennis. That was my
Okay.
short list.
All right.
I like Janine as well.
Okay. All right. Janine?
So if we took your Virginia,
All right. And then let's have a backup.
good point.
So Rita or Dennis, did you have?
Either one, I don't have strong feelings either way.
You have your little notes
Yeah,
there.
uh-huh.
Rita
Rita has been on the Arts Commission.
Oh, yeah.
So she'd be
Yeah.
very strong in that
Yeah.
area.
Yeah, I thought that was good.
And so Rita?
Yeah,
I like Rita.
Okay. All right. So she would be the third choice.
that's perfect.
All right. Okay. All right. And now, we've all been waiting for.
Not quite.
No, I know. Get back to my agenda here. Okay, so the presentation overview of upcoming deliverables, objectives, and outreach. Again, that was,
I can update you if you'd like.
are there updates?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent, okay.
So just briefly, this kind of builds off of what was presented to the GPAC at the meeting on July 29th, but wanted to share that we have a draft vision statement that staff is reviewing. Expect to send that out to the vision statement subcommittee hopefully tomorrow. And it's based on initial input from the vision statement subcommittee with respect to structure. So that'll be floating through that subcommittee to make sure that that is in alignment with what they expected. And then it'll be shared with the full GPAC hopefully in September. We have also a draft phase 2 outreach plan that I'm reviewing. Once that is in alignment with what I would expect, I give it to the outreach subcommittee to review, and we'll hopefully bring that to the September meeting as well. And then from there, we'll really look to kick off phase 2, which is general plan update development, and start to get into potential goals and then policy topics to explore, and it'll be kind of the fun part. So I think that'll be a very different component. The subcommittee will still be, the various subcommittees will still be very involved, but we'll have more community-wide workshops on those goals and topics, which I think is something the GPAC has been looking for. And then further, as mentioned earlier, we will be going to the various responsible commissions and committees to vet those goals and policy topics. So that's all part of phase 2. That's really all I had for now. I just wanted to tease the vision statement and the phase 2 outreach.
Okay. And the timing, let's try not to get too bogged down and just skip. I mean, I always get, it's like, oh, we can't do anything in December. Oh, it's holidays. And so let's try to keep moving, because I think once we get into this, we get a certain momentum, and to try to have long delays between meetings and everything can be very frustrating. You sort of lose your momentum. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you. That's good. I think, and this will be the fun part. I think that we sort of laid the groundwork, and now everybody can get.
So may I ask, is there a way for us to pre-plan the next 5 to 6 months?
I think we have some of that, but so why don't we present it at GPAC and make sure we can really look at it at the next, because that's in what, 2 weeks?
I can work on that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so then we can make sure that we're not just, I mean, obviously we don't want to meet on Christmas Day, but try to move our way through that. All right, I asked for this to be the next item. Oh, I'm sorry, any public comment on this? Yeah, Dennis?
Well, it's not on this, it's on the last item.
Okay,
and
well,
you didn't call for public comment, so I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. My fault.
This was in reference to the one candidate being with Precern, but we had people on from the development community before. In fact, you are replacing some of the people from the development community who have stopped showing up or have dropped out. So it sounded odd that was a disqualifier, or seemed to be a disqualifier. Okay?
Okay.
Or, or whether it was that particular group, or if it was from the development committee, maybe a clarification on that.
Would you like to clarify?
No?
No.
Not much you would.
Chair Gardner, I have a comment that kind of bridges between the two items, which is, as I said in writing, it appears maybe we have a couple of additional vacancies on the GPAC. And if we're getting into an active phase, we want to be sure to advertise those quickly so those people will come on board. And I'm saying that because I go to the aviation committee meetings, and they've had a vacancy for going on 6 months or something, and never gets advertised. So.
Okay. No, I thank you for that, because I keep checking off, and I kept meaning to go back and look at the absences, and I hadn't. I'm going to contact them and just let them know that either they start showing up or we will be replacing them. And I thought that was an interesting point he made about the fact that after a certain period, your application is not because I thought that they were too. So we might ask, if we go into another session of needing new people, ask the clerk to send maybe an email to those people that just say if you're still interested, so they won't do that. Okay, thank you. Okay. I asked for the next item because there are questions everybody has. There's misinformation out there, and this was an opportunity to clarify some things. My first concern was I was told that the density bonus units could be counted either way, that they could be counted against our RENA numbers. And staff has contacted, my understanding is staff communicated with HCD, and HCD has said no, that they are in addition, and that you have requested a letter to that effect from them. Have we gotten a response? Have we actually gotten a letter?
Yeah, this is just to clarify the question. I think there's two components to that. So in terms of density bonus projects and when the units are created and constructed, even the bonus units, they will count against our RENA as or towards our implementation. So every year we go through and we do an annual review, and we show how many units we've constructed, and then we're able to count that and credit that against our RENA obligations. So they do count towards RENA. But in terms of, I think the other question, in terms of our rezoning program and the development limits that we're establishing in the various focus areas, the bonus units themselves would be above and beyond those development limit caps.
Right, so if we have 2,500 units, and there are 5% of those are density bonus units. Once we've reached the 2,500, those density bonus units, though, they're in addition to.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, and we have confirmed with HCD, and we anticipate them preparing a letter for us.
Okay, that would be good. Philip, I know you had a question about overlay zones.
Well, I think we got into this a little bit before, but back to your point, are you in agreement with what Jaime's just said, your understanding?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're good with that. The only thing, I know we got into overlay zones before, the only thing I wasn't understanding is that in other municipalities, and I will tell you, some of this is in other states, so I don't know about the state of California, there is a certain way to limit the number of building permits issued in an area to where you're still able to control it. And I know this came up a month or two ago, and Ben, you and I talked about that a little bit. Has that been explored at all?
We haven't explored anything beyond the development limits. And I think that there are a lot of state housing laws in place that would preclude us from putting a cap or moratorium on building permits for housing based on number of permits received. I think that would be directly in conflict with state law.
Okay. So once the zoning's in place and the overlay is in place, you've calculated per each overlay, you guys have figured out how many units then could be built on each parcel, and we've come up with that matrix to understand what the delta could be between what we're actually saying is built and what could be built?
So the way that the housing element contemplates compliance with the RENA allocation is coming up with an inventory of sites and then further applying a redevelopment percentage, which is a theoretical sort of percentage of how many of those sites are anticipated to turn to residential in the planning period. And so, for example, let's say in the airport area, there's several, over 100 something sites, but there's a 30% percentage applied to the overall plan that says only 30% of those sites are likely to redevelop. And that's how that development limit that goes into the overlay is derived. So that is how the strategy comes about, is taking a larger basket or bucket of parcels and applying a percentage to what's likely to redevelop. And that comes to the development limit itself, which is in the overlay and also in the housing element and the land use element now.
When you say development limit, you mean number of units per acre?
Number of total units
Per parcel?
for the focus area.
Okay, so why would you take a larger area and put a larger overlay on top of that versus a smaller, more cohesive overlay where you've calculated the total number? Wouldn't that satisfy ARENA as long as you're providing the necessary area to build out the number of units?
I mean, that's a very complicated question because of the 6-cycle requirements for housing elements, and as much as you need to provide substantial evidence that these sites are going to turn or likely to turn to housing within the planning period. So it's not as simple as just calculating acreage and density and then coming up with the minimum RENA requirement. It's more, we have to provide adequate demonstration of sites that are likely, or that there is a propensity, as the word is used, to redevelop as housing within the planning period. So it is not as simple as just taking 100 acres and then doing 50 DUs per acre, and we've hit 5,000 units and we're done. We have to account for the likelihood that some of them won't redevelop. And that's a very real issue that HCD is trying to tackle.
Yeah, so that I understand. So the antithesis would be the other side of it. What happens, because I thought my understanding was we provide the platform and the opportunity. We're not responsible for the actual number of units developed by the public market, correct?
Right, we can't control private market, and we're planning for units.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it seems like there could be something different, but you guys are more on top of this than me.
I thought there was some issue with actual execution of units.
I don't think, my understanding is there isn't.
I think if for example, the city has X amount of units planned and nothing comes online, then perhaps we get a a more scrutinous lens as to, okay, well, what are the issues? Why is that? Is it a city policy or is it interest rates? You know, we can't control the Fed. So I think that there could be a more close lens placed on the city if that were to be the case. But there's nothing that, you know, the city is directly tied to having to have these units come online in terms of being actually produced.
Okay.
And then to Nancy's point on the density bonus, I'm still not understanding. Every environmental impact report I do has to clarify the total maximum buildable amount. How is density bonus not calculated and reviewed in the EIR?
It actually is. It's in the project description, but it talks about more of a narrative fashion of it being speculative. I think the key differentiator is you might be thinking about like a specific project. Specific projects, we know the finite number of units that are being proposed, whereas this is a programmatic EIR that analyzes the 5 different focus areas, or 6 different, because it includes Banning Ranch in the EIR, the entire program. And there are no specific projects wherein, you know, the office building is coming down and now it's being replaced with X amount of units. We don't have that. So it's more looking at the entire program as an additive component to what's already on the ground. And what I mean by that is there's no contemplating of different things coming offline or coming down and being demolished and replaced with housing. It's all, this is additional housing opportunity on top of the existing development. And so the narrative in the project description talks about, because the environmental impact report is so conservative in that respect, we're not taking into account things coming down to put housing back. It covers a speculative amount of density bonus units. So there's no specific unit identified, because it's far too speculative to assume that X housing development is going to use a 50% density bonus.
I understand, but it just doesn't make sense to me. And by the way, you do have a finite number of density bonus units. You can calculate it at 100%. If everyone did their density bonus, you can come up with that number, correct?
That would be very extreme to assume that there's 100%.
I understand, but it is a finite number you can calculate.
Sure.
Okay.
It's difficult because eligibility for density bonus is range. There's some classes of projects that can receive unlimited density. So it really is speculative to try to nail down exactly how many potential density bonus units could evolve through this. So it really depends. It depends on project's proximity to a major transit stop or high quality transit area. That all manipulates how much density bonus a project's eligible for. But under CEQA, if impact is speculative and we're unable to really determine exactly how many units, we just have to acknowledge that in the document, and that satisfies CEQA.
Okay. And when you say that, so you're saying some parcels could have an unlimited number of low-income density bonus units built?
Potentially.
It's not done by formula?
Correct. There's a formula. Well, no. So if there's a 100% affordable housing project located in a high-quality transit area, or I forget what it's called, but good transportation intersection, they are eligible for unlimited number of density. So it's whatever you can fit, but they do have a formula. It's like you get an extra 3 stories above whatever the base height limit is. So there is some.
Okay.
Do they have to park them?
No parking at all, in some cases. So it varies. The density bonus law is really strong, but you can get a density bonus for senior housing, for student housing. There's a lot of different varieties as well. So it really is impossible to try to calculate.
But you don't have to, they can just build without providing any parking?
Certain projects. So those 100% affordable housing projects near a high-quality transit corridor, that would be the exception.
But if they weren't, say they were not near it, would they then have to park it just like the city's regulations?
Correct. So any project that's eligible for density bonus, they're eligible for reduced parking standards. That's less than our regular standards.
Okay. All right. Another question, Coyote Canyon. If that is developed, it's part of one of our areas of interest, and we realize that most of it can't be developed via a golf course or something like that, but there is strip, it is part of our housing element proposal. Is it also the county's? I mean, how does that work? Because some of it's county property, isn't it?
So it's in the city's jurisdiction, although it is county-owned property, and it's our understanding it's in their housing element as well. But they have a policy that talks about coordinating with the city to pursue including that as something that they can take credit for. So right now, there's nothing that the city has in terms of an agreement to share regional housing needs assessment requirements with the county, such that we can both take credit for that site. The city would take credit unless we work out some sort of an agreement to share the credit, but that's not on the table at this time.
I mean, does the city have first claim? Is there any leverage, or is it just if we want to be nice and, I mean, can we just tell them no? We're taking them all, or?
Yeah, the latter.
Oh, okay. How to win friends and influence people.
Yeah.
All right, any other, Kimberly, do you have anything that you wanted to bring up?
No, the density bonus was really where I was.
Okay. All right, for public, you have questions that you would like clarified on these issues?
Chair Gardner, members of the committee, regarding the density bonus units, I had thought people had been overstating the case because I understood people were concerned we were not counting the density bonus units that might actually be helping us towards meeting our RENA requirement. The RENA requirement that we need to meet is not the 4,845, but it's the 2,707 moderate and below income units. And when a developer gets bonus units, which they get for building some affordable units, the bonus units themselves, my understanding is the reason that they're bonus units and an incentive is that they will be developed as luxury market rate units. So counting or don't counting them doesn't really help us very much towards the 2,707. But I just heard that a 100% affordable by transit can get unlimited density bonus units. So are those more, does that mean that they can build more affordable units than the general plan would allow? Or does that mean that they get luxury units so that their 100% is not really 100%? Are those density bonus units also affordable units, or are they more market rate?
I can't answer it.
Yeah, so in that scenario, that's like an affordable housing project. So the bonus units themselves would be affordable as well. I think there's a small allowance to allow for like the caretaker or the manager's unit. But that extreme example is really for 100% affordable housing project. So in that case, all those units would help us in our lower income obligations.
Right, but most of the bonus units that the city has approved so far, in fact, all the bonus units that we've approved so far have been, the developer can use those for whatever price range they want. That's why they are an incentive for building some affordable.
Yeah, so I think in what we're seeing in Newport Beach as the typical density bonus project is the developer is providing a small amount of affordable units on site within the projects, maybe 5%, 15%. Those are the affordable units that do help us with our lower income obligations under RENA, but to help subsidize the developer to provide those affordable units, they get additional bonus units, which are typically going to be above moderate income.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those bonus units don't really help us.
Right.
And then another comment that I have heard often is this, that we are responsible for planning, but we're not responsible for building anything. And I don't remember what the forum was. I brought to the mayor's attention that there is a California Court of Appeals case from last year or the year before called Martinez versus the City of Clovis, in which they had sought to fulfill their RENA obligation by using overlays as we're using. And the overlays at the end of the planning period had not accomplished what the overlays were supposed to do. And the ruling, as I recall, in that case, number one, if the units don't materialize, they carry forward to the next RENA cycle on top of whatever obligation the SCAG, in our case, assigns to us. So they don't go away if you don't build them. And number two, in this case, in the city of Clovis, the decision was, since the overlays weren't working, that the city would actually have to rezone properties to residential from their current commercial or whatever use they were, to force the redevelopment so that the existing use would then become non-conforming and have to turn into residential. So there is that, and then as to our general plan and the planning period, because of COVID, this got off to kind of a slow start. So I think we need to remind ourselves this planning period ends on October 15th, 2029. It's only 5 years away. And our current general plan not only expected 30% of the properties to redevelop by then, but those that do redevelop, it promised that those would be 40% affordable. And I really don't think any of that is plausible to be happening in the next 5 years. And that's my comment. Hopefully HDD is not listening.
No, they're not listening to us. They may be listening to the Planning Commission, but they're not listening to us.
May I say one thing? Mr. Mosier, though, one thing, even if a site goes from, let's say, a commercial zone to a residential zone, and it's accomplished by a rezone and a new general plan amendment and all of that, it still doesn't guarantee that those units are going to be built. Because what happens in most non-conforming uses is they wait till the end of their useful life, and then when there's a conversion that takes place because the useful life of that office building is now obsolete for whatever reasons, then the conversion takes place. So I don't even think, even doing all that still doesn't guarantee that a unit's going to be built on that parcel.
I think that's true. Our planning people are more conversant than I am about this. I think uses kind of can go on perpetually, but in Newport Beach, when we did the last general plan amendment, there was a 10-year abatement period for properties that had been rezoned to residential. So I think the previous commercial uses were supposed to be abated within 10 years, and that gave them enough amortization, as the word goes, to.
But even at the end of that 10 years, it doesn't delineate that that building's going to be torn down and turned into housing. That's my only point. It's still, when you keep carrying it out, unless the city's done something, this is my personal view, my understanding, unless the city's done something to thwart the development, the city can't guarantee that those units get built.
That I think is true.
We can just plan.
Yeah.
Plan. Okay. Any other comments? Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, this is my first time here. I'm from Canada. My background is real estate development consulting. I don't know if the door is open or closed, but I'd love to put my name forward to help. I didn't know if something got decided earlier for the committee. And just, I guess my comment is kind of in response to the last comment. A lot of it has to do with the financing for the developments that take place. So I work with groups that either come in on the equity or preferred equity, sometimes in the debt side, sometimes arranging developments that really fit the bill in terms of the financing of what's available and the larger scale projects. Sometimes that may influence whether a project gets, over the finish line or not. So, just to kind of, I'm happy to help, provide guidance in that direction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There may be other openings, so keep your eyes open for that. But also, I would invite you particularly to come to the General Plan Advisory Committee meetings, because we ask the public to participate. And also, there are subcommittees for each element. There's a land use element that meets. When do you have a meeting scheduled, Susan? For the land use elements subcommittee? Not yet. But anyway, and they're always on the city calendar, notice on the city calendar. All right, good. Any other comments? Susan?
This is really a question as to what has happened since the last city council meeting. and whether or not communication has taken place with HCD, what the response was, and what the next steps are for the city. I was at the meeting, but I'm not clear on what the next steps are. Okay? I mean, is it possible to just...
Yeah.
Okay.
Just making sure you're done. Yeah, I assume you want me to address that. So yeah, the council took action to basically adopt the land use element as it was written. So the land use element on the city's general plan page has been updated. In the meantime, we have submitted a revised language to HCD for review of a potential amendment to the housing element to clarify the implementing actions. That was circulated for a 7-day public review, and we received one comment from Mr. Mosier that was transmitted to HCD for consideration along with the review. And we are actively following up. It's now been in their queue for almost 2 weeks come Friday. We were told that there would be a fairly expeditious review. Given the narrow focus, it only affects small portions of 2 sections of the housing element. In terms of a narrative, it does not affect the sites or anything that is integral to the sites. So HCD is reviewing the amendment. We are currently targeting coming to Planning Commission for consideration on September 5th, and then coming back to City Council on September 24th for the potential to amend the housing element and also conduct a second reading of the 2 ordinances, one being for the multi-unit objective design standards and the other being for the zoning overlays, which would then take effect if that second reading were conducted 30 days later. So that's a current snapshot of where we're at. Again, to clarify, council did certify the environmental impact report, took the action to override ALUC, and adopted the resolution to basically change or amend the land use element to create the policies, as well as adopted a resolution to initiate the housing element amendment. So hopefully that provides perspective on where we're at.
If I may, I have a follow-up question. And that is, I was at the city council meeting when the action was taken, but I was not aware of the next steps. And so how do I keep on top of what the next steps are that are being taken? I mean, I'm on the advisory committee, but I don't think that has been reported out to the advisory committee, has it? So I'm missing something in terms of my monitoring of what's going on, and I'm not sure what it is.
The city has a housing element implementation program update page, which has been updated to include all of the council resolutions and proposed ordinances. No announcements have been shared out to the General Plan Advisory Committee other than what was raised organically at the last meeting. And I would say that any potential items coming forward for Planning Commission or City Council, there will be a 10-day public notice published in the newspaper.
So my follow-up question is, then if I wanted to follow the communication flow that's taking place between the city and HCD, how would you do that? Because it doesn't seem like it's part of the process that we are, the public process. Is that correct?
You would want to be signed up for select alerts. I would be surprised if you haven't been signed up by now, but we can definitely make sure that's the case. When you're signed up for General Planning Division news or Housing Element Update Advisory Committee is still a topic, that sort of announcement gets transmitted through that process and comes to those subscribers via email. So that is the primary mechanism we use to broadcast it. It also shows up as a news item on the city's website, and that's what happened with the initial posting of the draft language for the housing element.
Thank you.
Ben, what is the amendment to the housing element that you mentioned?
Sure, so it's amending section 3, which is the primarily the constraints analysis, and it talks about Charter section 423. So it's a change to augment that section to be more clear that City Council determined a vote is not required.
So it's all of the things that were listed in that City Council appendix, which...
Basically, I don't know that we had draft language attached to the City Council staff report. We didn't. But there's a small section or a small portion of section 3 that's being revised. I'm happy to email this to you as well.
Yeah, I think I understand what it is. I just want to make sure it's really not a substantive change. It's just the removal of the...
Right, it's just a change in how the city is implementing a housing element.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I have a follow-up question to that. Revision language was posted, which is why I commented on it. And as Ben said, it is confined to providing a rationale for why the city would not be having the green light vote that it previously said that it would. But when I reviewed that and hadn't noticed that before in our housing element, among the sentences in that section that were not crossed out was one that kind of supported a belief I sort of had about housing elements, which is that the detailed policies in the table that we keep seeing repeated, showing how many are pipeline and how many are in this focus area and so forth, was just demonstrating feasibility, that we had a plan that if we followed it, we could meet our RENA requirement. But the sentence said that might not actually be the way we implement it as long as we achieve that objective. And that's not exactly a policy, but that was in this narrative part, if I remember correctly, leading up to where we're going to have a green light vote. It said that it demonstrated we could meet our RENA requirement, we have enough sites and so forth. But we were not committing necessarily to that exact plan. So many in this focus area, so many in that focus area. So I am puzzled by that because we've kind of been told we have no flexibility. It's in our plan, yet like the provision that we're going to have a vote that HCD certified, and now the explanation we're not going to have a vote that they're going to certify. They also certified this sentence that says we reserve the right to have a slightly different plan that still meets our RENA goal. So at this point, do we feel we have any flexibility, or do we actually, we're being very fastidious about removing the green light vote. Do we have to be equally fastidious about any change, or does that certification that we have flexibility still apply? Because it seems important to the council to know, do they have to follow exactly the focus areas, the numbers, or do they only have to have a plan that accomplishes meeting the RENA requirements?
So as much as I've worked on the housing element, I don't have it memorized, so I'm not entirely sure of that sentence, but I'd be happy to connect offline about that with you. I think just based on what you said, I'm assuming it might relate to potential for there may be more ADUs than what's shown as proposed, which is the 240. As you might remember, the city proposed 1,000 at the onset, and we're actually doing very well producing ADUs. So my assumption is that it's probably leaning towards giving the city flexibility in how the composition of units in that table comes about, and perhaps also flexibility in how the focus areas are implemented, meaning there could be additional sites added to the overlay that are not housing element inventory opportunity sites. I'm assuming that might be what that's kind of portending to, but I'm not 100% sure without seeing it and diving into it in more detail with you.
Any other questions or clarifications sought? Okay, any council announcements or matters they want on? Okay. And we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.